Trigger is here and she is so incredibly broken she might just replace Astra in many teams. Or will she? Well, it is actually not her who is incredibly broken, but the combination out of her playstyle and her signature weapon. But is her signature required for her to even be useful in the first place? Well, obviously not, but there's a lot of nuance to it. So let's log in and talk about her kit and how she plays, her best weapons, destroys and destroys sets, her combos, her main and substats, her teams and Mindscapes, and lastly, let's also talk about her pros and cons. Welcome, I'm Rivenous and this is your complete guide to Sharon Trigger. Trigger is an off-field electric crit rate based stun agent, and outside of not taking a lot of field time, she is fortunately really easy to play. On the other hand, she also really wants her weapon, because, well, she is crit rate based after all, and it turns out there are no other stun weapons which provide crit rate. Actually, that is not even the reason you want her weapon, but we talk more about that later. First, let's talk about her kit, because if you think you already know how she works, well, actually probably you do. But I might still have some small quirks which might be of interest for you. Trigger features her own resource called Purge. Hold down her basic attack and Trigger enters the sniper stance, and she will continuously shoot during this. If Trigger is attacked while in the stance, she will also automatically trigger a perfect dodge and launch a counter-attack, which can only trigger once per stance. Every shot and the counter-attack will generate 25 Purge, which means after 4 shots we are fully charged and can stop holding down her basic attack, which will then trigger a finishing move and trigger a quick assist for our previous character. So, how do we spend her Purge? Well, there are 2 ways. The first being whenever any active character uses a basic attack, dodge counter, special attack, dash attack or quick assist, Trigger will cast her harmonizing shot in the background, which deals aftershock damage, inflicts daze and consumes 3 Purge. This harmonizing shot can be triggered a maximum of once every 3 seconds. The second way of spending Purge is whenever another active character triggers a heavy attack with an EX special attack, assist follow-up or ultimate, she will consume 5 Purge to cast Harmonizing Shot Tartarus, which basically does the same as before, but stronger and cooler. It is important to note every type of attack can only trigger this up to twice every 20 seconds, which means her Harmonizing Shot Tartarus can be triggered up to 6 times within 20 seconds. Realistically, however, this will usually be 4 to 5 times, since at least our DPS kind of usually wants to preserve the ultimate for the stun window. And while this in theory could make you run out of Purge, her EX special and ultimate exist as well, so let's talk about them next. Her EX special deals massive damage and daze. Well, at least in theory, because her damage really isn't even worth talking about. But the multiplier is high, I guess. Anyway, after using her EX, she will trigger a quick assist for the previous character and enter the coordinated support state. And whenever any active character hits an enemy with any attack, Trigger will cast a harmonizing shot without consuming any Purge and without cooldown restrictions. This is actually only partially true, because there does seem to be an internal cooldown of about 0.3 seconds. Her ultimate looks cool and does a lot of damage and daze, and will also trigger the coordinated support state as well as the quick assist, which we have just covered before. Her chain attack does what a chain attack does, and outside of reminding us of really bad times in Shadowlands, it doesn't really do much else. Her dodge and assist do what they are supposed to do, and they are really not worth talking about, so let's finish the kit overview with her core. Her core passive grants us a 35% stun damage multiplier increase every time she uses her off-field attacks, and this multiplier will apply even when the enemy isn't stunned, which basically makes this a 35% undiluted damage multiplier outside of the stun window and an additional 23% damage multiplier during the stun window. Lastly, for her additional ability, we are looking at either an attack or electric agent, and because her additional ability is actually somewhat important, this will limit her teams by quite a bit, as we will see later. However, if the condition is met, we will gain an additional days increase for her aftershock attacks for any crit rate that exceeds 40%. This caps at 75% gained and hence 90% crit rate. This is both a problem and not a problem at the same time. Without her signature weapon, it is basically close to impossible to reach said 90% crit rate. We would be looking at 22 crit rate substat rolls or 4.4 rolls per disc. Fortunately, it is not super important to max this out, as we will see later during the weapon section. Given how much of her days comes from her basics, we want to make sure to max out her core and basics first and foremost, followed by her EX special and ultimate, and lastly we are looking at her assist. Her dodge will likely never be used, so we can just, well, not level it. For combos, well, she doesn't really have any real combos, so I will just list what she can do and a small little trick here. For our opener and to refill our perch, we hold down her basic until her perch is full, then either swap her out directly or wait for the quick assist. Personally, I find the time until the quick assist triggers to be too long, so I usually just switch directly instead of waiting for the quick assist. However, both of them work. Her EX special's iframes are somewhat long, so I would much recommend using it to dodge long onslaughts of attacks or difficult patterns of an enemy attack pattern. And with that, we are getting to where you are all skipping to anyway. The weapons. And because it worked the last 3 times so well, let's do it again. Pause the video here and leave me your favorite food in the comments. Mine is Okinawan taco rice. Or trigger spat. Not sure. Anyway, let's talk about her weapons. So, her weapons are interesting. Her damage is so marginally low, it usually doesn't matter in the first place, and if we are only looking at days, her signature is not even her best in slot for Deadly Assault. In fact, because of how Deadly Assault's HP bar works, we can expect a nearly 100% uptime on Fossilized Core for the first 20,000 points, which makes Fossilized Core the best free-to-play option in terms of days, even better than her signature. And for TO defense, unless you have a box cutter R5, Core is still her best free-to-play option. Other non-free-to-play options such as the Restrained, Hellfire Gears or Blazing Laurel are good choices as well. However, there is something her weapon does that no other weapon provides, and that is so utterly important for her that I will actually dedicate an entire video just for that. Unfortunately, that something is really difficult to show in calculations as well, so not only did I calculate it, but I also tested a lot of teams to verify my suspicions. The TLDR here being as Trigger really wants her weapon, not only because of the crit rate it provides, but more so because of the team damage it gives, and without her signature weapon, you honestly have a lot of other options you could play instead of Trigger and get a better score or time with. For example, Nicole. But I didn't record another 12-minute video because of this being a simple topic, so I would highly recommend watching my vid on it when it is released. You will find a link in the description and top right corner right now, because I want to keep my guides as neutral and as objective as possible. Next up are her disk drives, and because nearly her entire days comes from her basics, a 4-piece Shockstar Disco is her best in slot, and to be fair, honestly also only real choice. Technically speaking, a 4-piece Shadow Harmony works, and while it would make building her a little bit easier due to the 12% additional crit rate, her days dealt suffers due to that. If you have enough crit rate substat rolls, you can go for a non-woodpecker option for the 2-piece for just a little bit more damage. As for her main stats, a standard layout of crit rate in slot 4, electric damage in slot 5 and impact in slot 6 is her best choice, with or without her signature. Getting as much crit rate as possible, up to 90%, is very good for her days, but if you happen to roll an insane amount of crit rate substats, you technically could go for a higher damage option. And speaking of which, please don't take these at face value, as they will change depending on your current specific stat distribution. Generally speaking, however, for her substats, focus on crit rate first and foremost until at maximum in 90%, then crit damage, attack percent, flat attack, and lastly flat panel. Her Mindscapes are interesting. M3 and M5 exist and give you more days and damage, M4 and M6 give her more personal damage, so they don't really matter either, simply because her damage is already pretty low in the first place. Instead, I want to talk about her M1 and M2. We can get her M2 out of the way pretty quickly as well. It gives 24% crit damage to the team, and that is honestly pretty bad. Even Astra's skill gives more at 25%. And it on top of that also gives 25% damage percent. So yeah, the M2 is not good. Her M1, however, is worth talking about, especially in relation to her weapon. It effectively transforms your core skill into a 24/7 Jingyi. Imagine your Jingyi's damage boost during the stun, but now it is active at all times. It essentially makes Trigger give a 55% undiluted damage modifier, and that translates into approximately 15% more total team damage compared to M0 for doing absolutely nothing compared to M0. It is probably one of the best Mindscapes we have had so far in terms of damage, and nonetheless it is still worse than her signature weapon, which gives about 20 to 25% more damage to the entire team. TLDR being, they are both a bit too good in my opinion, but if you were to choose, her weapon has much more value than her M1, and the other 5 Mindscapes don't really matter. As per usual, spend reasonably. If you do, don't spend money you don't have, or better, don't spend money on gacha in the first place. Just because something is good doesn't make it necessary. For teams, you will find the dedicated team video right here and in the description after it is released. Trigger's teams are unfortunately pretty limited, and I would only really recommend her for 3, maybe 4 teams specifically. She is the Premium Plus Pro Max choice for Soldier Zero Anby, especially when paired with Astra, but Caesar, Rina or Lucy work just as well. However, Trigger will also not bring too much of an improvement to the team over other choices such as Nicole, especially at M0 and without weapon. In terms of team damage, that is. She is much more comfortable and also easier to play than Nicole. If you really like Yanagi hypercarry within a mono electric team, we now have a double stun option with Trigger and Chingy as well. While I personally would not recommend this team over choices such as Trigger, Yanagi and Rina, I personally found it a lot of fun to play, and you can definitely clear with a 25 to 30k in Deadly Assault using that team. Hanumasa can make use of Trigger as well, however I would not recommend this team if you do not have Hanumasa's Mindscape 1. Chingy is generally speaking still the better choice here if your Hanumasa is at M0. Trigger can also comfortably replace Astra within a Yanagi Miyabi team, scoring about even or possibly even higher than Astra, at least if you have her signature. Without her signature, she is again at about the same performance level as Nicole, maybe a little bit better depending on how well you can use Nicole, and a little bit worse than Astra. She will allow for an additional stun window in Deadly Assault, and hence allows for 2 additional chain attacks and possibly 1 additional ultimate and enhanced basic 3 due to the large amount of decibels gained from the chain attacks. This is in my opinion great news, as every team kinda wants Astra, and being able to free Astra from Miyabi while not losing too much performance is fantastic news. While you can surely play also Trigger within other teams, I did not find them to be anything great or much of improvement over other choices. This is largely due to her additional core skill requiring either electric or attack agents, and most attack agents we have, such as Evelyn, Soldier 11, Nekomata, Billy or Curran, who either not match very well with electric due to how enemy resistances are aligned, or agents like Su Zhuan who really don't want to be on field outside of the enemy stun window. Again, I'm looking here at Trigger without her signature weapon. If you have her signature, you can slap her in basically any team and she will do very well regardless of whether or not she actually provides enough days or not. A 24/7 35% independent multiplier across the entire board, as well as a permanent 25% death shred, are just that good. And without her signature, Trigger is still not a bad character by any means. She might just not bring the improvement you might hope for, especially if you already have the likes of Caesar, Astra or Nicole. But she is just much more comfortable, or in other words, easier to play compared to characters like Rena or Nicole, and can take the spot of these characters very easily, which makes team building much easier as well. For more information on her performance compared to other options in various teams, I recommend checking out my teams video on her where I did exactly that. Lastly, let's finish the guide with her pros and cons. For her cons, because we just talked about it, I find her teams to be very restrictive. Outside of Miyabi and Anby, mostly Yanagi is able to make real good use of her within a mono-electric hypercarry team. Her base kit does, in my opinion, not contribute enough to warrant a pull on her, as she does not bring a significant improvement over other choices you might already have on your account, such as Nicole, Caesar or Astra in basically every team, and she really needs a weapon to be able to compete with them. On the other hand, she can take the place of Astra in a few teams such as Miyabi-Yanagi teams, which has its value on its own. On top of that, she also is much easier to play than Nicole. She is relatively investment friendly, as we do not need to take care about investing into her dodge and partially assist for that matter as well. Her daze application is good even with free-to-play weapons, with the potential to be even better than with her signature, at the cost of team damage. Her Mindscapes are mostly not worth it outside of her M1, but that one is really good. And with that, we are at the end of the video. Thank you so much for watching, don't forget to like and subscribe for more Zenless Zone Zero content. Leave me a comment on your opinion on Trigger, on whether or not you're pulling for her or not, and I wish you a great day. Peace.